In this video, we review the process for changing ball joints in a Chevy Trailblazer. This is applicable to multiple vehicles. Check the website for which ones. Step 1, remove the wheel so that we have access to the axle nut. This is a fairly high torque application, and a heavy-duty impact wrench is helpful. Once you have that part off, we're going to remove the lower ball joint retaining nut as shown in the video. Again, most of the tools that we use in these videos are very standard mechanics tools, air wrenches, air ratchets. If you make the investment once, you will use it effectively forever, and it's applicable to many vehicles. Now we're removing the ABS wire and 4 plastic clips, and you can see by applying a small screwdriver to the right location, the clip easily breaks free. Next, we're going to remove the upper ball joint with a 15mm nut. This is a pinch type attachment. We're going to remove the entire nut and bolt. And now, with a little bit of assistance, those 2 parts can be removed. Next, we're going to remove the brake hose bracket. There's 2 bolts on the back side and a air-assisted or electrically assisted ratchet makes short order of this operation. Once complete, now we can remove the caliper itself. These calipers may need a little bit of assistance or an impact wrench, as they tend to be rusted, especially in the northern climates. But 2 bolts, and it should come straight off. Once removed, as shown in the video, we're going to hang that. Brian's going to use a professional hanger, but truth be told, a clothes hanger works perfectly fine. And now we can remove that rotor. It should slide straight off. And we want to disconnect that entire long suspension piece, which is called a knuckle. We're going to pull that knuckle off. It's still going to be connected by 1 joint, which is the steering arm.
And there's 3 stakes here. You can see it's staked in. You're going to have to pull these back.
Now again, Brian's using a couple of air tools here. If you did not have this air tool, which is frankly an inexpensive air tool, you could do that with a chisel and a hammer or even a hacksaw. With a little bit of oil or lubricating oil, he's impacting that out. Now, if this is an older vehicle, sometimes they don't come out as easily as you need. Here he's using an actual acetylene torch. If you don't have an acetylene torch, you can use MAP gas, which is found at your local hardware store. That heat will expand the outer area, loosen it up just enough that you can push it through. And there it is. Be careful not to touch it. This is still extremely hot.
Little nipple right there. So that nipple extrudes extra grease. So you want that to be facing away from the brake rotor.
Now we're going to press in that new ball joint. This is not a very expensive tool. However, most auto shops, in other words, O'Reilly's, AutoZone, actually will rent these tools to you for free, and you just can return them once you're complete. So, fairly straightforward process if you have the right tool, but it's not a tool that you have to buy and own. Now we're going to install the snap ring on top of that as an extra security protocol to ensure it doesn't fall out. Ensuring the grease zerk. Now, one of the problems with grease zerks is people forget to actually lubricate them when they change their oil. So friendly reminder, once you install it, actually take the time to lubricate that joint every 10,000 miles or so, and it'll last a long, long time. Now we're going back through the reassembly process. First part is reconnecting that entire knuckle assembly in both the bottom and the top. So Brian is working it through to get it installed. Once he has it on the lower level, he's going to just hand tighten that lower nut. In these cases, always use new nuts. They are generally supplied with the ball joint itself. And now he's connecting it on top. Now, if you look at the way that joint is set up on top, there's an actual groove in the pin. So even if that bolt fell off, it's still retained. So it'll retain in place even if that bolt goes loose. Now we're going to tighten those to the proper torque spec. Now, this is an 81 foot-pounds. The truth be told, most mechanics will not put a torque wrench on that. They do it by feel. If in doubt, use a torque wrench to make sure you're using the right tension. When tightening the upper one, you may need to use an extra wrench to hold the back. Now we're going to install the rotor and then reinstall that ABS wire. Now that rotor is really just hanging on there. It is not bolted in any way because once the wheel is assembled on this car, that firmly locks that rotor to the wheel assembly. So there is no reason to actually create a temporary screw on that rotor. We're putting that wire back in place, clipping it. We clip it in place so that as that suspension moves up and down, there is low risk or virtually impossible for that cord or that cable to come in contact to the tire itself. Now we're putting that brake hose back in location. Two 10mm bolts at 20 foot-pounds. And now the axle nut. Now, be careful there. He's installing that, but he's not torquing it, and we'll show you why momentarily. Now we're going to put the caliper back on and install those two bolts. You'll notice mechanics use a lot of flex heads. It just gives them more flexibility to get the tool in the right location for tight joints. Now we're going to go back and tighten that axle nut. This is 103 foot-pounds. This is a high torque application. It's a critical, so you can see Brian actually is torquing that with a torque wrench, and he installed that screwdriver to ensure that that rotor did not turn so he could get it to the proper torque. Put the wheel back on, and we're going to tighten those 5 bolts in a torque pattern, or a star pattern, at 100 foot-pounds. Once he has that complete, he is going to torque that down with a torque wrench to make sure they are at the right setting. Nobody wants the wheel to come off. And then finally, a friendly reminder to always have your car aligned after you do suspension work, because it will change some of the dimensions. It will cause the car to be out of alignment, and you don't want to wear your tires out too quickly. Good job to Brian and Tom.